Live from the American Gulf Coast, it's the Dave Nemo Show.
Cattleman, feudist, outlaw. I'm talking about Matthew Hulbert. No, Matthew Hulbert is an Elliott Associate Professor of History at Hampden-Sydney College and Series Editor of American Wars and Popular Culture at LSU Press. His research revolves around 19th-century America with special interest in the American Civil War, guerrilla warfare in the Western borderlands, otherwise known as trucking radio, memory film, and the Western frontier. The cattleman, feudist, and outlaw, son of Martin and Mary Peters Ringo, was John Peters Ringo, better known as Johnny Ringo. And that's who we're talking about today on the Bushwhackers. Hey, Matthew, good morning. How's the world treating you in your neck of the woods?
I'm doing well. How are you, man?
I don't have any complaints. I am broadcasting, as I'm going to keep on saying this, live from the city of New Orleans off the I-10 corridor at the historic Degas House at the Fastport Studios of Radio Nemo of North America. So it's the second show I've done from here. So it's been really fun. The shows actually fly by now. I think it's because of the new digs. I just dig it. What are you looking at me for, Dre? You got that strange look on your face. What's going on? Oh, you had that look on your face. I thought maybe I'm not being heard. Okay, Matthew's here. Johnny Ringo is on the table. So let's kind of jump into this, by the way. He has been portrayed by numerous actors, and there are numerous takes on him. But he's always kind of presented as a wild card, is he not?
He is, and we can get into his filmic portrayals a little bit later, but it's the spread of actors who've covered him, but then the way they've covered him. There might not be another Western figure who has that sort of a range of depictions, but he's born in really the sweet spot chronologically to be part of, that relatively small window where the West actually is wild. He's born in 1850 in Indiana. And in the late 1850s, his family relocates to Western Missouri. Not the greatest time to be showing up in the Western borderlands, but they move to Liberty, which is actually going to later be a guerrilla hotspot. He's a distant cousin of the Youngers, actually, through marriage. A little bit later, they end up in Gallatin, Missouri, and then in 1864, the war in Missouri is bad enough, the guerrilla war that is, his family decides they're going to pack up and go to California. So there are some really interesting what-ifs there. Had they stayed another year or two, given what we know about Ringo and his personality, there's a really good chance if he'd just been a little bit older, he ends up tacked on with the likes of Arch Clements and the Jameses and the Youngers. He had the blood relation. He clearly had an inclination to violence, but his family escapes before things really go haywire after the war. On the way to California, his father has an accident with a shotgun and kills himself, and this is really the beginning of the downward spiral for Ringo. So the family ends up in California, but he abandons the rest of the family very quickly, goes to Texas, is involved in a range war there, the Mason County War. Then he ends up in Arizona, which is what we all know him for. He gets hooked up with Curly Bill Brocious, Stillwell, Clanton, the McClowrys, the Cochise County Cowboys, and he ends up in this feature vendetta against the Earps and Doc Holliday.
This is an interesting thing, is we've talked about this a little bit, but there are, in many ways, these are kind of action junkie sociopaths, many of them, who are simply looking to be hired onto causes. And I'm kind of curious, when we talk about Ringo, how much of, because there are people who are involved in this stuff that we've talked about who actually do either make a living off of this stuff and have no other alternative to making a living from it, or actually have a stake, meaning they're people who own a stake in a bar or a town, a municipality, or cattle interest and all that kind of stuff. But he falls under the category of just liking mixing it up, just being a mean SOB. Is that a fair assessment of Johnny Ringo?
I think it is, and he's for as notorious as he is, we don't know quite as much about him as some of the others, partly because he doesn't live nearly as long as the Earps or some of his contemporaries. It's really hard to say how he would have turned out, one, if they'd stayed in Missouri, or two, if his father just doesn't kill himself accidentally on the way to California. If his father's alive, he might never leave California. If he doesn't end up in Texas, he doesn't end up in Arizona. His first killing in Texas, he's really just kind of hanging out with a friend who's involved in the range war and goes to help the friend avenge the murder of another friend. So like you're saying, Ringo really has no financial or kin stake in these wars. And it's kind of like, and we see this with lots of the gunfighters we talk about, once he dips his toe in that water, he can't get out. He kills his first man, he's indicted, he's acquitted, but then he's got to leave Texas, and he ends up in Arizona. There are only so many options for a man with Ringo's resume now, so it's not surprising, right, that he falls in with Brocious in that crew. But for a little while in Texas, he tried to work as a lawman. So he's got a little bit of that Wyatt Earp thing where he's really sort of skirting that gray area between the law and then outlaw. But he also falls into a pattern of very heavy drinking, which is, again, not unusual for the guys that we talk about. So it's also hard to know what's driving that.
Let me stop you for a second.
Other flaw?
Let me stop you for 1 second on our kind of exploration of Ringo, because the one conversation we haven't had in depth here is people need to remember that Americans in the 1870s and 1880s brushed their teeth with whiskey. That and I mean that seriously. I mean that there were people, who literally lived inebriated, that the alcoholism, that prohibition doesn't come about by accident in the United States. It isn't a bunch of do-gooders who want people simply to stop drinking because a few people have had a few too many. The country was bombed. And we've never really had a conversation about how much alcohol plays into all of the nonsense that we enjoy, that you and I enjoy so much talking about once a month on a Friday. Yeah, he really is. He's one of these people, and he's presented that way in many movies. Powers Booth. A lot of not Powers Booth.
Michael Bain.
Michael Bain, sorry, Michael Bain. But there's a lot of Booth plays Brocious. But there really is. There's a lot of people who just simply stagger around drunk for the better part of their adult life in these stories, right?
Yeah, and you got to remember, this is a world before refrigeration. This is a world before you have reliable access to clean water.
Aspirin.
So alcohol, you're drinking something with a built-in antiseptic. It's just kind of what people do. But to put Ringo in perspective, in a world where people drink alcohol the way we drink tea and milk and juice and water, people look at Ringo and think, my God, you drink too much. He's even set in that world, he is setting the alcoholism bar very high. His death story sort of is the exhibit A for this. He rides off into the desert, and the last guy who sees him says not only is he so fall down drunk he can barely stay in the saddle, he's clanking because he's basically packed what for most people would be a month-long supply of liquor in his saddlebags, and he's going. He's so drunk that at one point he stops, puts his boots on his saddle, and then loses track of the horse, tries to make himself moccasins out of a blanket. They think he only makes it 100 or so yards in this footwear, one, because he's totally bombed, and then also because he's got no shoes. So he sits down against an oak tree, and he just shoots himself in the head. And that starts its own whole separate, how did he actually die? There are several competing theories, but he is a drinker among drinkers. But you're not wrong about sort of the quantity of booze that's flowing in 19th century America, especially in the West.
Matthew Hulbert joins us this morning here as we keep our conversation about the bushwhackers going, in particular, Johnny Ringo. We'll be back after these messages and talk about, how he has become a cultural vessel for a lot of villainy and a lot of wildness. We'll be right back as the Bushwhackers continues here on the Dave Nemo Show. Go to RadioNemo.com.
17 Sapp Brothers Travel Centers are known for great food, hospitality, and mom-approved showers and restrooms. But don't forget the service centers. Sapp Brothers ASE certified technicians can repair nearly any issue in shop or roadside, including axle repair. Dig into your free steak dinner with your oil change. That's a Sapp Brothers tradition to thank you for your business. Tires? Sapp Brothers will beat any competitor's advertised price on tires. And download the Sapp Brothers app for exclusive promotions in the shop, restaurant, and store. Your spot under the coffee pot is waiting for you at Sapp Brothers.
I'm a long-haul trucker. I don't have time for nonsense. So when I fuel up, I need to get in and get going with a fuel card that takes me there. Founded in 1978 by a trucker for truckers, Multi-Service Fuel Card is run by real, honest people who are there to help us road warriors keep our freight moving. And with nationwide acceptance, fuel discounts, and dedicated customer service, no matter where I'm going with Multi-Service Fuel Card, I never roll alone. Learn more at neverrollalone.com.
There is lightning flashing outside. I'll have a weather report at 7:45, let you know the lay of the land. I've also got a story coming up, speaking of the weather. I don't know if you know this, over in Kenner, just on Wednesday, 10 cabs caught fire along with 4 other vehicles. The fire chief of Kenner, which is not too far from here, actually says it was not caused by lightning. It is currently 7:17 here. You heard the spot over the break. The multi-service fuel card has been helping fleets manage fuel spending since 1978. Over-the-road trucking companies have been looking to those guys to provide quality customer service, generous lines of credit, and a nationwide network of fuel-saving truck stop locations. Go to neverrollalone.com at 7:17. Speaking of rolling alone, Johnny Ringo rolled alone out under a tree, took a pistol, and blew his head off. The details of that are still unclear. Matthew Hulbert is actually talking about Johnny Ringo here with us on the Bushwhackers. Matthew, what are some of the speculations as to why, Johnny pulled that trigger? I think we got him on mute, Phone Master Dre. I think the good man is muted. So I'm going to talk here for a minute until we can get him off that mute button here, and remind people that the phone lines will reopen at 7:30 at 615-292-6366. You guys should give us a call and jump into the conversation there. A big heads up, we got 2 segments coming up here in just a moment. At 8 in the center, 9 in the East, we're going to have Education Station. Drayevsky's who we're going to be talking to. Dan Drayevsky of the Milwaukee Area Technical College. We'll be shooting the breeze with him. And then after that, Colin Long is going to join us for Washington Trucking Week. We're going to get him to stick around a little bit longer and have that conversation with us. And maybe take some of your phone calls at 9 in the center, 10 in the East. Quick reminder, the Weekend 34 has a full lineup, and maybe I'll get Lindsay to drop in the last half hour. But we hope to hear from you guys, and you guys will give us a call back then. We'll get Matthew back on the phone here in just a second, get him off of that mute situation and see what's going on there. But like I said, if you guys want to give us a ring and jump into the conversation, we would love to hear from you starting at 7:30 in the center, 8:30 in the East. We're talking about Johnny Ringo here, just to kind of give you a sense as I kind of speak to you from the studios over here in New Orleans. So let me kind of get into this until we get Matthew here. So on Wednesday morning at 4:30 a.m., as a trucking company out in Kenner, in their yard, 10 of their cabs caught fire. 4 other cars caught fire as well. The fire department got there. Fortunately, the CRC, which is the company where the fire began, the buildings themselves were not caught. They were able to create a foam line around the trucks and prevent the fire from spreading anyplace else. Matthew, do I got you back?
I think I'm back, man.
Welcome back, brother. Welcome back.
The ghost of Johnny
all right.
Ringo didn't want us talking.
Johnny Ringo, the ghost of Johnny Ringo, invaded our studio over in Ocean Springs. Hey, listen up. So let's talk about this. So why did Johnny do it? What are the speculations around Johnny doing it?
Well, I think the biggest speculation isn't why, it's if. The coroner at the time, based on the entry and exit wound, the fact that he's holding his single-action Colt in his hand, laying there dead with one empty cartridge in it, the hammer down on that cartridge. The coroner at the time, in 1881, ruled this a suicide but subsequent counterclaims arose. One, Wyatt Earp's last wife, Josie, publishes an account that claims Wyatt killed him with a rifle, which really makes zero sense based on the evidence, even the position of the body afterward. There is a claim that Doc Holliday killed him, which is sort of the inspiration for their Huckleberry duel in Tombstone. Michael O'Rourke he's just a wandering gambler, claims that he killed Ringo. And then a man named Frank Leslie also claims that he killed Ringo, but the thought there is probably that he's trying to curry favor with the Earps because the Earps believe that Ringo is part of the group that shoots up Virgil and kills Morgan. So the safe money is that he killed himself, but that's kind of like saying the safe money is that Oswald was the lone gunner. We really don't know, and the conspiracy theories are kind of more fun.
It's interesting too because you and I have a very controversial opinion. I don't dislike it as much as you do, but Tombstone, by the way, I think relies way too much on close-ups and has way too much over-the-top dialogue. I did think when I saw that sequence, I don't know enough about Ringo to know the stories around him. I thought, man, that is really clever. The way the up close and personal way that he outdraws Johnny Ringo in the scene, Michael Biehn versus Val Kilmer. That sequence, I said, that's a really good version of what could have happened. Really fun, because he gets him really up close and he gets him in the side of the forehead, if I remember the sequence properly. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yeah, and it's that was the tension that had sort of been building throughout the whole film. Interestingly, in Tombstone, even though Wyatt Earp kills more people than smallpox in the movie, he's never portrayed as a gunfighter, right? Holliday and Ringo are the two true gunfighters of the movie, so it makes sense that it's Highlander, only one can survive. But that's on kind of the far end of the Ringo spectrum. On the other end, you've got the gunfighter with Gregory Peck, which is it's a lament for Ringo. He wants to leave, right, his life as a gun hand behind. He wants to take his wife and the son that doesn't know he's his father to California, but he can't escape his past. And at the end, he basically martyrs himself, allows himself to be killed, and then basically says, the curse is yours now, to the guy who shot him in the back. And then kind of right in the middle in Gunfight at the OK Corral, you've got John Ireland, who made a career out of playing the grinning, he's bad, you just don't know he's bad yet kind of guy. But he's really more of a side character. So it's Peck and Biehn, and there's really no middle ground for Ringo, which in a way makes sense for his legacy because we know so little about him and how he died or why he died. There's a lot of room in the middle for interpretation. He probably more than any of the other Western figure, like old Western figures that we've talked about, is speculated about because he's just as famous as any of the others, but we probably know the least about him.
And that's the thing, because one of your specialty is how myth is created. One of the things that you really are kind of fascinated about is how myth is created. And with people like Ringo in particular, a lot of these guys have very vague backgrounds, and so many of them told so many lies when they arrived out in the West. The West becomes this kind of giant liminal space. I think one of the appeals that a lot of our listeners have to this is that it's this kind of great place of becoming, that you can kind of cast aside who you were and become something new, although in the case of many of them, their past do catch up with them. But I'm kind of curious that, often the people we talk about are quite aware, even if it's only a rudimentary awareness of it, that they can in fact become something else and create their own myth. That's not the case here. This is just a dude who is out there bombed off his gourd and killing folks. But because there is so much unknown there's a giant space, a giant pocket by which any kind of creative storyteller, movie maker, novelist can kind of step in and breathe life into them. When does he really begin to become kind of a larger-than-life character? Because, he passes away under that tree. But when do the stories really start to emerge about him in popular culture?
Well, he is really sort of a character actor in the broader Earp drama. Nobody remembers Johnny Ringo for the Mason County War because nobody remembers the Mason County War outside of Texas. And I know Texans are shooting me evil eyes through the phone, but he's got to get to Arizona. He's got to tangle with Holiday. He's got to tangle with the Earps. He's part of the John Behan posse that goes to try to serve the local warrants on Earp's federal posse. So he's really mixed up in what is probably, I don't know, a top 3 overall Old West drama. You've got Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. You've got what's going on in two. Honestly, we could say it's top 2, probably. And the more that gets portrayed, the more his name comes up. And then eventually, because he is sort of this amorphous blank slate, somebody catches on, with Gregory Peck and says, we can say whatever we want about this guy in the script because nobody knows any better. But I think it's his star turn now for most of I don't know how many people have seen Gregory Peck play John Ringo, and I don't know how many people under 40 could pick John Ireland out of a lineup, but everybody knows Tombstone, and everybody knows I'm Your Huckleberry. So in a way, what is probably the least likely outcome for him has become sort of the overwhelming way that we imagine him, which I don't know if that's unfortunate or not, because I don't know the extent to which a guy like Ringo really deserved to have, sort of a big say in his legacy. He certainly doesn't have an advocate like Josie Earp or the wives of some of these other figures who basically become an industry unto themselves, controlling the way we remember them. He didn't have anybody.
Well, no, and the other thing is, too, is that for all the villainy that is ascribed to him, he's often presented as a complicated villain in the sense that the line about him that Doc Holliday utters, he's an educated man. Now I know I hate him, which gives him a sort of gravitas in the way that many of the cowboys, Ike Clanton, the way Ike is presented, the way Brocious is presented, a lot of them are really buffoons. I mean, they're nothing more than a bunch of thugs. But Ringo is presented as this sort of complex character, and there's no foundation for it. There is so much in that presentation, given what you've kind of described historically. That's pure speculation. Both Gregory Peck and Michael Bihn's versions of it give him a lot more depth than anybody gave him at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, so his father obviously dies young. I mean, that's a regardless of, we'll never know if he's always a sociopath or if that's a later development. But he watched his father accidentally shoot himself with a shotgun when he's 14 years old. So there's definitely some lingering trauma there. But part of the reason people at the time were willing to accept the coroner's decision that this was a suicide is because on multiple occasions, Ringo had told people, I'm going to kill myself, which is not something that happens. There are a lot of suicides in the 19th century, but it wasn't normal for someone, especially a semi-public figure, to just walk around saying, you know what, I think I'm going to kill myself.
Well, and you can make a case that alcohol abuse is merely what happens in a world before Prozac, what happens in a world before, Adderall, what happens in a world before medication. I mean, that's the thing. Alcohol, we come back to it, once again, becomes a catch-all, cure-all for everything. And if you have a raging bipolar disorder, which is what it sounds like he has, alcohol might be the best kind of way to self-medicate at the time. Not so.
It's one of those things where people are like, he's crazy. He's told us 8 times he's going to kill himself, and he did. So we believe him. It's really later when we don't want that to be the story, because that's just not what we ever want to be the story, right?
Well, no, and of course, because also the Earp women want to make sure that their husbands get credit for every single killing of a bad guy that ever happened in the West. Matthew Hulbert joins us this morning. It's the Bushwhackers. We've been talking about them.